Welcome to the Quantum Biology Collective podcast, where we break down the practical strategies of this emerging science, starting with healthy light habits and going wherever the quantum superhighway takes us. This is your host, executive and life coach Meredith Oke, with a quick reminder that podcasts are conversations, not consultations, and definitely not medical advice. We're here for informational purposes only. To follow up with our amazing guests, please do check out the show notes, and to stay in the loop with the QBC podcast, join our email list, also linked in the show notes. One of my personal favorite topics to talk about is navigating paradigm shifts, and our guest today has done that in a very unique and interesting way. Rachel Maurice, MD, worked inside the Canadian healthcare system for 30 years. She has 20 years experience as an anesthesiologist at a very busy hospital in British Columbia. And around 2020, she started doing research and asking questions. And anyway, long story short, she left her job in the hospital system, which was the main source of income for her and her children, and took a leap of faith into the unknown, and is sharing that journey with us today. So it's really interesting. Rachel's journey started by doing work to move through a traumatic personal event, which then led to work to move through her physical health and to learn a completely new paradigm, including getting certified at our partner organization, the Institute of Applied Quantum Biology. Rachel is certified in some other very interesting modalities, which she will talk about in the podcast, that are far outside what you would think a traditionally trained hospital physician would be interested in, but Rachel is. So we go through paradigm shifts, and we talk a lot about the power of the subconscious and how that plays into our health and our life's journey in general. So enjoy my conversation with Dr. Rachel Maurice, the Unconventional MD. And don't forget to check out our brand partner, Boncharge, at boncharge.com to receive 15% off when you buy something from them. Enter QBC into the little code box when you check out. All right, here's my chat with Rachel. Hi, Dr. Rachel Maurice. Welcome to the QBC podcast. This is going to be very fun.
Hi, Meredith. Thank you for having me. It's exciting. Full circle here.
It is. I know. I think the first time we were on a call was a discovery call for the certification program, and now here we are doing a podcast. I love it.
Yeah.
So, Rachel, your story, I just love. I mean, I say that about all the stories because I love stories. But, okay. So you are a doctor in Canada, in British Columbia. You were an anesthesiologist for many years, and now you are not. You are an alternative health practitioner. So just in broad strokes, like, walk us through that journey. So medical school, full medical career, and now total left turn.
Yes.
How'd that happen?
I know.
In a nutshell.
I sometimes think.
I know it took 20 years or whatever, but in a nutshell.
Okay. I'll try to be concise. Grew up in a household just very academically oriented. Father who was a physician, mother who actually was a nurse, lawyer, real estate agent. I had a propensity for sciences, and I think as part of the school system, my aptitude just leaned more towards the sciences. And so I ended up going into sciences in my undergraduate degree. I did microbiology and immunology, and then went right into medicine, even though I wanted to take a little bit of time off. My dad encouraged me to just apply anyways, because it's always difficult to get into those kind of programs. Ended up getting in. Had the forethought, though, enough to, in any spare time that I had, because I did not have responsibilities, and I saw adults with responsibilities knowing your time is very limited, I made sure I did a lot of traveling. Especially as a medical student resident, the banking system they'll throw money at you because they know when you're done, they'll have you kind of tethered to so I had the money going into debt to do some traveling, but I don't regret that. I definitely felt that that was worthwhile. And then decided to go into anesthesia as well, with some forethought, knowing that I wanted to have a family and I wanted to be able to participate in raising my kids, because in the decision-making process of residency, my year was the first one that kind of they changed. So you didn't have that first year of what's called internship and you rotate through everything and then you make a decision. And there's a reason I'm actually sharing this, but you had to make a decision right from medical school, and not everyone had the exposure to be able to make that kind of decision as to what you wanted to do. So they had lunch hours where different specialists would come in and talk about their life, because ultimately your career you're doing for however many decades, or that's the thought anyways, you want to make sure you're doing something that is sort of compatible with your life as well. And I just remember several surgeons coming in. There was a lunch hour where there were 3 female surgeons who came in. And this stayed with me, obviously, a plastic surgeon, a cardiothoracic surgeon, and a general surgeon. And the entire hour was them trying to one up each other on how quickly they'd gone back to work after having a baby. And the plastic surgeon was 1 week, I'm not kidding you, 1 week. And they were criticizing one of the other ones for it being 3 months, but this woman had been hospitalized for something. And so that just totally turned me off of surgery completely.
Yeah.
And so, I really was like, for me, the reason I would want to have kids is to, be able to participate in being around them, not have a nanny, 24/7. So I chose anesthesia because I knew also when I was at work, I would be completely focused. And when I got home, I didn't take that patient load home with me. So I could focus on what was going on at home and other parts of my life, and a lot of other reasons as well. But so I did my anesthesia residency, which was 5 years. I did that in Edmonton, actually. It was a wonderful program. I have to say, I had a great time. I really loved it. I loved the staff. I loved the people. Got a lot of experience. And then I decided so I'm from Vancouver. I know you mentioned originally BC. So I'm originally from Vancouver. I'd gone back to Vancouver, knew that I didn't want to be in a big academic institution. There's just a lot of egos and a lot of butting heads. And it's just really difficult to actually practice medicine without having to get your back up and explain yourself as to why you're doing your job the way you're doing it. And so I ended up in the interior of BC. And I've been here I came just before my son was born. So I've been here 19 years now. And I was practicing for 19. So I was practicing for 16 here, because I left in 2021. It was definitely my choice based on the options that I had, because I left because of the mandates. And I'm just going to interject here for 1 minute, because yesterday was a momentous day in BC. I don't know if you heard about this, because I know you're from Vancouver as well, right? Originally?
Toronto, but I
Toronto.
have family in BC.
Okay. So BC was the only one holding on to the Emergency Act for the pandemic in all of Canada, which affected the healthcare workers. So BC was the only province left where they did not hire back any of the staff, the healthcare staff that didn't take the shots. And so yesterday was the day that they revoked the Emergency Act. So there is no longer an emergency in BC.
Just now?
Just yesterday.
Okay, so we're in month 7 of 2024, just to clarify. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So just under 3 years of that. But having said that, they have implemented some other rules that would deter the people who did leave from even going back, because I don't have to get into that, but I just thought that was, it's a really momentous
interesting
day.
And so So to clarify a little bit, you were an anesthesiologist. You were working in the same town in British Columbia for 16 years. And then when COVID came, uh, your province made it mandatory that in order to keep your job, you had to undertake a medical intervention related to COVID that you did not want to take. So you chose to leave your job. Is that what
Correct.
happened?
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
And I
Good.
didn't, honestly, I didn't think that it was going to last very long because the state of health, I say that loosely, healthcare, it's disease care. But the state in Canada, I'm not sure, people listening from all different parts of the world, but lots of the world looks at Canada as a great healthcare system and that it's socialized and everyone gets access to it. But there's a lot that goes on within the system that the general public is not privy to. And there's a lot of staff shortages and a lot of corners, I would say, that are cut that can impact people's lives that, it's just not talked about. And I would have said beforehand, it's not something that I would talk about, obviously, behind closed doors. Um, but it's not something that the general public knows about. But I thought since the staff that did not want to undergo this experiment were leaving, things would get really dire and they would just have to ask people back. But the system was crumbling and they did not. So it just continued to get worse.
So even with staff shortages, they still maintained that rule.
Oh, absolutely.
And so none of you were offered your jobs back.
Yeah.
Even just up until, okay.
And just as an example, like I remember hearing one night there was in the emergency department, and just so people understand, the town that I'm in the hospital is the second largest trauma center in the province of British Columbia. So it's not a dinky little town. And there was one nurse, an LPN, which is not the same as a registered nurse. An LPN has 2 years of training. And there was one LPN in the emergency department looking after 52 patients and was
goodness.
obviously overwhelmed and called up to the operating room to ask for help from the staff there, which meant that the operating room staff was left with holes, right? And not being able to cover for the emergencies that come in. So that's just one example of, what was going on and is still problematic. We're now actually, our province had been getting a lot of staff from overseas, hiring people from overseas, nursing staff and so on, to fill
in order to fill the shortages because they're so understaffed.
Yeah.
Wow. And still, yet, even though that situation has pretty much passed, it's still not an easy path for those of you who left for that reason to get back into your jobs.
No, and a lot of people have gone to other provinces or even left the country. So a lot of the physicians and nurses that I know. So yeah. And what is very interesting though is, so once I left, I learned
that must have been a tough decision. Like that was your career.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I kind of glossed over that because I think it's been so many years now that I've worked through a lot of the kind of discomfort. But initially, yes, it was a difficult decision, but at the same time, an easy decision. It was difficult because that literally was all I had known in terms of my education and my career. And I put all my eggs in one basket in terms of what I was going to do for my life in that regard, right? To support a family. But if I can kind of go back a little bit, I've always been one that in my mind has looked after my health. And it just was a priority for me to the degree that I knew how, right? Which is mostly what we're taught about exercise and nutrition. And again, I still didn't know what I know now about nutrition. I didn't know back then at all. And it's not taught in medical school. But I as I was going through my medical school and my residency training, what I saw going on in the system made me very heightened to not ever want to access the medical care that was given. So,
right. Yes, I hear you. I have a relative who we've just gone through along and are still going through the hospital system. And my takeaway, and I said to my husband and Jason, I talked about this, we're like, okay, so the priority is to like never need it.
exactly.
Like that's got to be from wherever you are, whatever point you're at right now in your life. Like the goal is to not need the medical system. And that's, obviously you're in an emergency or get in a car accident or something.
Exactly.
But from a chronic health position. Okay. So that was what the conclusion you came to working inside the system.
Yes.
You're like, wow, I never want to rely on this system.
Yes.
Working it. Okay.
And not because of the hearts of the people that work there, right? Just because by the nature of what it is, when you intervene, you do some kind of procedure or you give some kind of medication or something, there is always a risk. And I know that in my family, when I would kind of talk about these things, I would get, well, you see a very skewed view because I'm going to see all of the complications. But for me, thankfully, that's what I saw, because then it really made me work on myself, so that I would not, I was doing everything in my power to not need it. So,
right.
Yeah. So,
and I, that's a great point you mentioned there too, is that it's not the individuals, it's the system.
right.
I will say, in our personal experience, almost each person we've had contact with has been very kind and clearly wanting to do a good job. But the way all the pieces fit together, it's impossible to have a good outcome, basically. Like there's the communication isn't there, the big picture isn't there. There's just so many issues along the way that even though each individual person is kind and competent and whatever, it's not fitting together.
No, and that just reminded me, that brings me to a point. I know that when we were talking sort of before we started, I wanted to bring a couple of things up, and that ties into one of the experiences that I had, that again, the people meanwhile, and sometimes the bureaucracy and the administrative part of things gets in the way. And, just an example, and this really, again, this is something that has stayed with me, because there's a very dear friend of mine, and he's passed away since, unfortunately. One of the general surgeons, like the biggest heart that I know, and always advocating for the patient and just wanting what's best. And, I remember, because I was on call the same night as him, so this came up because he got really angry about it. But there was a call that a patient was going to be coming to the emergency department, and it was clearly it needed surgical intervention. And our emergency was full. The operating room was backed up. Sometimes things get delayed, and we wouldn't be able to get this person into the operating room because of, ICU. There's a whole bunch of things going on. And so one of the things that we have to do when people are coming to the hospitals, make sure there's a bed available for them. So that is not the physician's job, but you have to communicate with someone who, the bed person, right? Like, I don't even know the name of some of the people, but anyways, so he was communicating with these people, and he said, we have to divert, like, I really want to divert this patient to another hospital because we can't accommodate this person coming to the operating room. And they said, no, you have to accept this patient. And he said, this person could die because they need surgical intervention, and it could, just the nature of it, could spiral so that this person could have a really bad outcome. And they were adamant that he had to accept this patient in the hospital. So, whose job is that to make that decision, right? Like, would you not defer to someone who is the person who works with this and is experienced at it on a regular basis, or someone who knows nothing about medicine making these decisions? And that kind of ties into what's gone on in the last 4 years. But,
right.
So
the person insisting, no, that patient has to come here, was not the doctor who was looking out for the best interest or the best outcome for that patient. It
Correct.
was the bureaucracy
Right.
was in charge.
Right. Right. And then,
Okay.
so this surgeon took it upon himself to make sure that this other person's name was documented all throughout all of the charts, saying, like this was his, conclusion, and then this other person's. So anyways, of course, that person didn't want their name on the charts and came in right away and tried to remedy things because they didn't want the responsibility. But yeah, that's just an example of the way the system is not necessarily set up for the looking.
And the way bureaucracy is set up, it's like, we will make these decisions on your behalf and take no responsibility for it.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Your name goes on the chart. My name doesn't go on the chart, even though I'm making the decision, but it's not really my decision. It's the system's decision. So it's not my personal responsibility. So I'm not going to allow my name to be on the chart, even though the outcome is extremely dire.
Right.
For the patient.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh God, Rachel. So crazy. Okay.
Well, it is. And this is what I mean by people just don't know. It's like when you know that you don't know what goes on behind closed doors in a family, in a household, right? You only see what goes on the outside. And so for me, I always, knew that I needed to take responsibility for my life and my health and those within, my family and close to me, to make sure that they got the best care and they understood exactly what was going on whenever they had to interact with, the system, anyone within the system. So yes, having said that, when I left, I didn't think I was going to be gone long, but I started doing a lot of research on my own, which I know that was kind of became a phrase, don't do your own research. but
leave it to the doctors. I am a doctor. Yes, but you're not the right kind of doctor. Still don't do your research.
Yeah. I started asking questions prior to leaving. I started asking questions of my colleagues because things were confusing to me. They didn't make sense. And what I discovered was everyone was just too busy in their own job, with their own families, just overwhelmed with what was going on, that they just wanted to focus on what they had to do on a daily basis and really not pay attention or not just listen to what they were being told. And that's the way medicine, I know Dr. Jack Kruse talks a lot about that, just how things have been designed and these protocols that are passed down from the people who make them, and you just follow these protocols. That's kind of how, in a sense, evidence-based medicine was born. You do these studies. This is what works on this group of people. Now you just transfer that to someone else who comes in with this problem, and that's the protocol that's used, right? As opposed to doing individual-based medicine. And so the nurses were far more open, when I was asking the questions, but I did get slapped on the hand several times for asking questions on hospital property and was told not to discuss these things inside. And I was fine to do what I wanted outside of the premises of the hospital. So that was very interesting to me. And I started doing a lot of my own research. And I think I mentioned at the beginning, I did my undergraduate degree in microbiology and immunology. So I had a little bit more understanding of pathogens and virology and the immune system than what the average physician is taught in traditional medicine. And even I didn't really know a lot, I would say, after what I started learning. And it just started to make me question everything that I'd been learning. And I did go down some dark rabbit holes, which were, made me feel like I was in the Truman Show. For anyone who's seen the Truman Show, kind of like, what is this reality we're living in? Our senses really so limited, and from so much learning, including the quantum biology, which I'll get to, our senses really are that limited to what is out there and what is in existence in this world. But I kind of have a few things going on in my head, and I know I might be jumping around a little bit, but tying into not necessarily wanting to access the system, back in 2017, I think it was, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And so she naturally turned to me asking for help and advice. And she was willing to go for surgery, but she didn't want to have chemotherapy and radiation therapy, as well, based on stories I think that I had shared with her. And understandably, a lot of people understand chemotherapy like wipes out everything, right? Not just the bad, but the good too. And when it's made, when it's being prepared and people are in hazmat suits because of the danger, it does make you wonder what you're doing putting it in your body. But that led me to learning about nutrition, which, again, I just reiterate again, physicians don't understand the impact that food and nutrition actually has on health, even to this day. But it really opened the door for me. And that, I think, led from one thing to another. And I'm not going to belabor this. I'm just going to say that I had a really rough and arduous divorce process that spanned about 10 to 15 years in and out of the court system. And that led me to a lot of emotional angst, mental, and as well physical, which translated into physical issues. But there was a period sort of between my mom's cancer and then the upheaval in my divorce that I discovered Joe Dispenza, which radically altered my life. Like I can't even explain how thankful and grateful I am that the timing was right, and I just was open to it, and it impacted me so much. And I say that because I had always been like, prior to that, I needed the physical, tangible evidence before my eyes to be able to believe anything. So anything that really was with the limited senses that we have. And Joe Dispenza does such a beautiful job of speaking to people who have that way of thinking and explaining things to them and walking in them through the science and some of the tangible evidence to the other side that you can actually understand and really, I was going to say believe, and I'm not sure believe is the right word, but I can't think of a different word right now. Believe that there is so much more out there that is impacting the physical nature of reality around us. And that is actually so much more powerful, so much more powerful. And it actually is the thing that affects our physical body, the physical nature of reality, but our body in this sort of instance. And, I just kind of went voraciously through all of his material, and I was like, I had to get to one of his week-long workshops. And miraculously I got in. And so I went to one in 2019, the summer of 2019, in Portland, Oregon. And if I had not witnessed what I did there, I'm not sure that I would have believed some of the things that took place. And it was just so incredible. And I had an experience of my own, a connection with a gentleman that was there that, again, it just really solidified. Sorry if it's noisy, there's a plane going overhead. um, it solidified for me that I was kind of on the right track, and especially in questioning everything that I had learned and understanding that there was so much more out there that really impacted our health that um, we're not led to believe, like we're not taught. There's so much conditioning in society, that we're really, I was unaware of. And I think most people are unaware of the conditioning that happens all around us. Like, if you don't create your reality, your surroundings is going to create it for you, whether you like it or not. And
yeah,
that was something as well. So upon kind of working through Joe Dispenza's work, my whole outlook on life changed. And instead of focusing on a lot of fear and, potential catastrophes that could happen, because that's also what I grew up around, sort of always, I think it's everybody's experience. But I really started to open myself to the possibilities that could happen and realize that I could actually make those possibilities happen. And that's what started happening in my life. And I realized that I don't know if I could stay in anesthesia for the rest of my career, like the rest of till retirement. And again, that's another conditioned sort of idea that you work a certain job until a retirement age, and then you retire, and then you can enjoy the fruits of your labor. And honestly, I know this is kind of a side point too, but what I saw happen when I was working was people working really hard until retirement, and then they get to retirement, and then they're diagnosed with cancer, or they have some kind of accident, or they come down with some chronic disease, and then they're like, I'm telling you, that was a good 80% of what I saw. So I was like, I don't want to wait. I don't want to wait until retirement to enjoy my life. And I also don't, I flipped my thinking to, maybe I don't have to retire if I'm sharing, if I'm learning my passion, and if I'm sharing that with people, then it's not about retiring, right? It's always about learning. If you're not, there's the expression, if you're not growing, you're dying, right? There's two paths. And so I kind of really, I felt like I embodied that. I really took that to heart. And so going back to my mom and the cancer journey.
I do just want to say,
Yes.
though, you did really embody that, because to go through something as intense and difficult as like a protracted divorce, when your children are involved, like that is, I think, one of the most difficult experiences that a person can have, right? And to not give in to the despair of it, but to seek another way. Like I hear this as a theme in your life, like even listening to the surgeons, and instead of being like, oh, I guess that's what's going to happen, I'll be a surgeon and I'll go back to work 1 week after I have a baby, you are like, no, I'm not doing that. Right. And like, even in the midst of this really, really difficult time, you're like, there must be a different way. And for so many of us, it's like that level of pain, whether it's a divorce or an addiction or grief, or it's something that just makes reality so intolerable that we get pushed through a portal to find some other way of living. And I just want to acknowledge that you did that.
Thank you.
Because it's a very courageous, powerful thing to do.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And yeah, I did make myself sick. Like and it's interesting because I know that I wasn't thinking properly, because I was in that state of stress, in that fight or flight for so long. I actually, like, I lost a bunch of weight and I couldn't eat. That was kind of really early on, but I gave myself an ulcer, and I had classic symptoms of an ulcer, but I couldn't even see that. Like, it took me talking to someone else, and they're like, do you think you have reflux and an ulcer? And I went, oh my God, that's exactly what I have.
Right.
So
yeah, it's like we become so numb to our own experience. We need that. We need it reflected back from someone else. And
yes.
we're like, oh, right. This is crazy and bad. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So now I'm trying to think.
So your mom. So you were helping your mom get through her cancer.
Yes. And then, so then that led me to Joe Dispenza, and not wanting to necessarily continue doing anesthesia for the rest of my life, but not knowing how to step out of it. And because, they made it very comfortable, right? Like, it's a very good, I earned enough money to support my family while working part-time. So that was very important for me, so I could be home with my kids. And, I could do it like the back of my hand. I had that much experience. I could close my eyes in the operating room and know exactly what was going on every second of the day. So learning new things, like it's challenging, it's difficult, and to step away from something like that. And I think that that's what the universe and God handed me in 2020. It was like, you make a decision, like, now's your time. And I was actually just on a call. We can kind of, I'll touch on this later, but I was on a call with a group of women, and we were just talking about how things had lifted yesterday, or that decision that was made. And I was like, I don't actually know anyone that would go back, especially because once you've been out for so long, like I've been out of it for 3 years now, and I feel so much healthier. Like I didn't realize just how toxic the whole environment was. And I now look at it that I truly feel like God plucked these people out of the system because they're like, you don't belong there. There's too much toxicity, too much darkness. It's like we need you to be doing work that's actually going to benefit. And I don't want to take away from the acute care side of medicine, but I just think what for the most part, I feel that God really plucked us out of the system and said, like, there's something more important that you need to be doing. And so that was my decision. And really, at the top of mind were my children. And I know that early on, and I know I got this from my mom, and I think a lot of women just have a tendency to prioritize their children even above themselves, at least early on, very much so. And so for me, I had done that. I saw my mom do that. I did that. And then when I started to kind of get sick with my divorce, I realized I had to look after myself. And I really started doing that and knowing that me looking after myself meant that I was looking after my children. Like that's the only way that I could properly look after my children and be there for them was looking after myself. And so that decision to leave was actually me looking out for me because I knew I had to be around and in good health, right? Not injured or God forbid, not dead, right? To be able to be there for my children. So that was just a no-brainer. And so that's why I kind of say that it was a simple decision. It wasn't an easy one, but it was very simple because it was a no-brainer for me. It was all about my kids.
And it makes so much sense now because you had had that experience with Joe Dispenza's work that like cracked you wide open and showed you like so many more possibilities of how reality operates. So then when that choice point showed up in your life, you had a foundation.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing
Yeah.
how it all works.
Yes. And you can't
How
necessarily see
life
it.
just flows along. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what are you working on now? So, you have left the system, but you are still very active in helping people recover. So, tell me about what that looks like in
Okay.
the the 2.0 version of Dr. Maurice.
Okay. So yeah, the first couple of years, or I guess the first year and a half, I was really kind of looking into what was wrong with everything that was being done in medicine. And then I started to realize, I have to start looking at where I can help people differently. Because there was a period of time where, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this can probably relate to a fear of actually going into the hospital or going to the doctor because of what was happening. And so I was actually spending a lot of time helping people from a mainstream medical standpoint, to help themselves because they did not want to go. They just did not want to go to the hospital or see a doctor who was just going to give them things they didn't want. And so I started thinking, you know what, I have to try some other things. I went and did a medical intuition course. I did some breath work. I did a meditation course. With Joe Dispenza, he works a lot with the Heart Math Institute. So I actually went and did a certification with the Heart Math Institute, learned a lot about heart-brain coherence. So that terminology was kind of coming in before I came across quantum biology. And I also did this energy somatic trauma release work. And the reason or how I came to that was actually through this person, Jason Christoff. And Jason Christoff's a Canadian, and he teaches about self-sabotage behavior and mind control. And this isn't sort of esoteric stuff. Like he's actually, in the last year, he's spoken to the European Parliament, the Romanian Parliament, the US Senate. Like he's had some big audiences because of what he's sharing is extremely pertinent to what's going on in the world today. He does a very, very good job at explaining it to anyone that can understand. He made me
And
see.
sorry, what sort of his key message is it,
So
that he's
he, so
delivering
what,
with these talks?
what I understand, what I was learning from Joe Dispenza about the subconscious mind and our programming, I started to learn from Jason Christoff from a different vantage point, and that is how the environment and the repetitive nature of what is in our environment conditions our subconscious mind, which is really what runs our thoughts, behaviors, and actions. And most of us don't actually realize or understand the profound nature of that, because it's like and I know these are kind of just the vague numbers, that 95% of us are run by our subconscious mind and 5% is run by our conscious mind. So it doesn't matter how consciously aware you are of wanting to do something. Like everyone can relate to the fact that they're like, okay, next time a situation comes up, I'm going to behave differently. I'm not going to let this make me feel a certain way. And then it comes up and it all comes back again and you can't help
Right
yourself.
back there. Yeah.
And so what really I came to understand with him, and it's not that it was new information, but sometimes you just need to hear it 1,000 times, that our subconscious mind really records every single millisecond of our lives. And it takes in, the stats are different from different people, but the latest one I heard was 4 billion bits of information per second. Like 4 billion, that's unfathomable, right?
God.
And our conscious mind can process maybe 126 per second. So clearly, there's one that has a lot more information to go on. And the other thing that he explains too is, our conscious mind is really how we want to run the show. But when our conscious mind is taken offline, which can happen with fear, it can happen when we're overloaded with toxins and our body's just trying to survive, then our subconscious programming really takes over. And the only thing that our subconscious programming and our subconscious mind is there to do is to keep us safe and with the herd, with the tribe. And really how it does that is by going along to get along, if you kind of catch my drift.
Right. I
So the
do.
more fear you're in, and I think a lot of people can understand and can
Yeah.
see what comes out of the media, what's on the news, what's in our entertainment, who we surround ourselves with, that really helps shape, how we see the world and actually how our physiology is run. So the best way to empower yourself is to clean up yourself, clean up your mind, clean up your body, clean up the emotions, which, I think that's can be difficult for a lot of people because, when you don't know any different, it's hard to change, and change is hard for people. But I'm kind of
Yeah.
going a little bit
And
off.
change triggers all the fear, and then you go right back. But so it's like Joe Dispenza sort of opened up how incredibly powerful our subconscious is. And
Yes.
then Jason Christoff is sort of showing us how that subconscious can be manipulated
Yes.
if we're not paying attention.
Yes.
Would that be an accurate way to describe what?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And when he lectures and he speaks, he does a lot of programs which are phenomenal, and he's very affordable compared to a lot of other things out there. Very affordable. He gives a lot of information for free too, but he shares videos and interviews, so it's not like it's his opinion. Like there's one, I don't want to go into detail about this, but there's one called the Ash experiment, which people can look up on YouTube. But there's also, there are these, I guess what they're called mentalist or mentalist people who do kind of magic and can manipulate people's behavior without them realizing it. And there's a famous one, I can't remember his name. There's a famous one out of the UK, and he recently did this whole elaborate kind of, I want to say show. It was a show, and he had hundreds of people involved, and then they were actors, and then one person that they kind of were manipulating. And it was called The Push. I don't think you can find it on YouTube because it's really taken off. It's really hard to find. They've taken it off. but it's called the push because they set this up, and it only took a few hours to manipulate people, because they had different people come through to murder someone.
Oh my God.
Yes. And it's, so I'm not going to go into detail about this. And if you want to get on Jason Christoff's email list, like, just, you can look him up on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook. He's there.
Right.
Get on his email list.
So this was like an elaborate sort of stage show to demonstrate how relatively easily we can be convinced to take actions that don't align at all with our values or what we would think that we would want to ever do in life.
Exactly.
Oh, that's really creepy. Okay.
And I don't mean to kind of steer this in a negative way. It was very eye-opening, and it just really made me all that more aware of what I want in my surroundings and who I want to surround myself with, and where I want my thoughts to go, what I'm listening to for podcasts, what I'm taking in. I don't watch TV anymore, but documentaries, that kind of thing. But through him, I came across somebody who led me to this person, Brent Boehm, who he's actually he gets called in for big traumas in the world, like 9/11, TWA Flight 800, like the Oklahoma City bombing. He gets called in to help survivors with trauma. And so I ended up doing a certification with him called holographic memory resolution. And that is to help people release traumas that are trapped in the body, which, again, that's not something I had ever learned in medical school.
No, they didn't teach you holographic trauma resolution.
No, or that trauma remained in the body.
Right. Or that trauma could even be in your body and have health implications outside of the moment it's happening in. Yeah.
Right.
Like that's voodoo woo woo.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
And that was it was very interesting, because it helped me, because I think everybody has experiences that they wish were different and don't necessarily know how to change them. I know there were a lot of things for me consciously. I knew I wanted to be different, but in my body, it just didn't seem like there was a connection. And this work actually really helped connect that for me. So it was something that I wanted to study and help people with. So I started out helping people with that. And that was actually quite successful. Like, a lot of people were very interested in it. And this was actually also through Jason Christoff. He sent out a link to do with fluoride and how toxic fluoride is. And the interview was from Dr. Jack Kruse. So that's how I was introduced to Dr. Jack Kruse. And that opened up like a whole new world for me. Again.
Whole other can of worms.
And he's brilliant, and has so much information in his head. And I was kind of getting overwhelmed and loving it. And I remember then coming across you because you had interviewed him. So I was just trying to find everything that he was, every single piece of media that he was being interviewed with. And then I came across you and your lovely quantum biology collective. And then I was like, oh, yes, I want to do this, because you had, you talked about having the structure and the foundations. And that's what I really felt was needed, because it's hard to know how to put a lot of these things together when they're, a lot of balls in the air and different angles. And it's nice to have things that build one upon the other to understand it in a more coherent way. And so that's when I started learning about quantum biology and circadian rhythms and the importance of that. And I have to say that this had such a profound impact on me, because having been in the healthcare industry for 30 years, my whole circadian rhythm was messed up, and then you throw divorce and kids in the mix. And then I couldn't even rest after call, because I'd come home to kids and, forget, you just like a zombie, right?
Yeah.
And I was exhausted, and it's it's odd, a little bit odd that after I left my work 3 years ago is when I started to actually have problems with my sleep. And this was just the perfect thing, to address that. And so I started immediately, changing, getting up in the morning. I was always really more of a morning person anyways, but getting up with the sunrise, doing more grounding, blocking artificial light at night. And within a few weeks, my fatigue during the day just vanished, like vanished. I had no slumps at all, ever. And it was just so, like, still so surprising, because it's like, was it really that simple? Like, was it really that simple?
Yeah, I know. It's like, no, it has to be more complicated. Block artificial light at night, go outside during the day. What? No. There must be more. Nope. Wow.
Yeah. And so, I had to share the information, right? But I think a lot of people are really still stuck in wanting to go to the doctor, wanting them to give them something. Like, they really want something to take. And it's just really, that's conditioning.
And some external authority figure to diagnose and like, you tell me what's wrong with me.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas when someone goes to a practitioner like you or like a health coach, it's like, it's a spirit of inquiry where it's like, no, you tell me what's going on with you and let's see what we can find out. Whereas the doctor, we just want that certainty and that finality and like, give me the thing that's going to make this better.
Yeah.
And like, I'm listening to your journey, right? And it's like this multi-year, multi-pronged, multi-layered journey through all of these different dimensions of healing. And like, and we like, there's no way that you could have gone to a doctor and had some like, and that, like, our health is our life. Like, this is, it's all the things.
Yeah. And that's that's really what I feel like when you take a step back and you take a 30,000 foot view, which we don't in medicine, right? Like, you have to specialize and subspecialize beyond the subspecialty. And then you really know what you're talking about, except you've lost yourself. Like, you've lost the big picture. And that's one thing that I have to say that I learned, and I love that I keep learning things, but looking at the fact that, the body doesn't work in isolation, right? It just, if you think about it, it's logical to say that. But when you get stuck and with blinders on, like when I was working in the hospital, it's like, okay, consult a cardiologist and consult a nephrologist for kidneys and a gastroenterologist for the gut. And they just focus on that part and negate how other parts of the body have affected that part, or how that part's affecting other parts of the body. That just seems illogical when you take that step back. And even more foundationally, I know that for quantum biology, a lot of people talk about how it's a different paradigm and way of looking at the body from a subatomic level, like really what's happening at the really small scale, because that's what makes up everything. But if you look at, for example, like how the mitochondria, like how the small parts make up the bigger parts, and the mitochondria is what generates the energy for the body to actually function. That, I think it's Doug Wallace who, describes how once you start to have dysfunctional mitochondria, like you can have up to 70% dysfunctional mitochondria before you start to exhibit any kind of symptoms. And then depending on where you are having the most dysfunctional mitochondria, you're going to express that in the body. So again, that's more sort of at the foundational level of every cell. It's not a matter of, oh, I've got a kidney problem. Oh, I have a heart problem, a brain problem. You've got like a small scale problem in that part of the body. So if you start to address, working on fixing the mitochondria and the energy, and you increase the energy, then you will regain health in that part of the body. So it's it's just really so interesting to me that there's so, I mean, it makes sense now from from another vantage point in my head why this is done. But, looking at things from a like honing in at on the separateness, like the division and the really small, I don't know if I'm kind of explaining this the way I want to, but when you're negating the bigger picture, I think that's when you really lose sight of everything. And I think that's what modern medicine is doing. I mean, you've got 35,000 disease names in the Merck manual. Like, we don't have 35,000 diseases. We have a problem at one level, right? And it's a way to get people distracted, in my opinion.
Right. Because yes, if you don't go down to the mitochondrial level, address things from the subatomic level, which is going to start repairing the mitochondria, you can pick off each one of those 35,000 diagnoses, but another one is going to pop up because you haven't got to the root problem.
Yeah.
And
oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead. I'm just saying the current medical system, even though Doug Wallace's work is completely validated, doesn't look at it that way yet.
Yeah. And it's also interesting. And I fell prey to everything, right? I fully admit that I feel I was indoctrinated in the system, and there's like a lot more that I could go into, and it's encouraged, right? Like the division and the dismissal of alternative therapies, it's encouraged. Like, it's kind of like a cult, like culture. It's kind of, there's a cult in medicine, and you just kind of fit in. And I fully admit that I was like, I fell prey to it, and kind of, anyways. One thing that I had noticed, which early on, seems like such a no-brainer, but it was such an epiphany for me, right? Within medicine, everyone practicing knows when you go in for like an ECG, you're measuring the electrical impulses of the heart, or the same thing with the brain. You go in for an EEG, like, you've got electricity there, which is energy, and, movement of electricity, you have a magnetic field attached to it, right? But it's completely ignored. There's no energetic component to what is actually taking place with treatment in modern medicine. If you even talk about the word energy, people roll their eyes, right? But they're working with it every single day. So that just shows how disconnected the people who are working in that system are, right? There's clearly, they're working
and
with
you're
energy.
Not allowed to point that out. You're like, you are measuring the energy coming out of this person's heart. And yet, if I talk about working with the energy, I'm like cuckoo bananas. Oh, naturopath, woo woo, blah blah.
Yeah.
Blah blah blah. Yeah, you're right. That is a deep disconnect that would fall apart under even the most basic of questions, which is why you're not allowed to ask questions. And in fact, you were explicitly told that, which you mentioned earlier in the conversation.
Yes.
No questions here, ma'am. Move along.
And you
can ask questions on your own time, and we will ridicule you and fire you for it.
And it's true, because I had posted something that I didn't think was controversial on social media. I was not a social media person at all before. Mm-hmm. Like, I just didn't have anything. And then I think I posted one thing early on saying, I teach my kids to question everything, even me, right? Because that's really how you get answers to things, is by questioning. And I got attacked.
Really?
I got attacked for that.
What year was it that was posted?
That was 2021.
Right. Because that was code. That was code for question authority, and question authority was code for I don't believe in science.
Yeah. But on a positive note, I just want to share a story. Sorry if you wanted to go somewhere else.
Share.
I wanted to share a story of something that happened to me in my residency that ties into just validating everything that I'm learning now that I didn't really understand at all back then. It was just something that was shocking to me and kind of like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. This is very weird, which is what a lot of people experience. And, you know, as physicians in medicine, when something out of the ordinary happens, it's like, oh, what was that? And then it's kind of gone. But I was a second year resident in anesthesia, and I was probably about 3 months into my anesthesia. And at this point, the hospital I was working at, when we did call, the staff would run one room, and then the resident would run another room, which again is something that people don't know. But the staff is overseeing you, but they're not in the room. And there's
Okay.
2 rooms. So I was running a room. It was myself in the room. There was a first year orthopedic surgery resident, and one of the nurses. And we were preparing a patient to do, she had a broken hip. So it was a emergency hip surgery. And for those cases, when it was an elderly woman, I had put in what's called a spinal. So to just freeze freeze the person from the waist down so they don't feel the surgery. And then you can give some medication so they have a nice sleep, but it's not a general anesthetic.
Okay.
So I had put, again, so my staff was in the room beside me doing another case. And I was in the room with a first year orthopedic resident and a nurse. I'd put a spinal in, and, you know, we started positioning the patient, and we had all the monitors on because we have to move the patient, put the monitors on. And I started to hear the monitors doing something funny. And, you know, we're taught, always look to the patient, because you never know if things get pulled off, right? Or if they're not on properly, especially if one of them goes. So I looked at the monitor, and all 3 of them went. And I was like, oh crap. And I looked at the patient, and she was blue. And so I was like, okay.
Geez.
So I like get the staff back, right? We put her on her back, start to do CPR. And of course I'm feeling like crap because I'm a resident, right? And this is happening. And this is, you know, early on in my career. And the staff comes in, we do things for a few minutes. And then he said, you know, based on her history and stuff, he was like, you know, don't continue the CPR, right? She was in her 80s, and you know, he was the staff, he was making the decisions. And I think we all felt pretty badly, you know, about what took place. And the nurse kind of started cleaning up her stuff. The resident and I, you know, started taking the monitors off and taking all the things off of the lady. But it felt like, you know, 5 minutes, it was 30 seconds. It felt like 5 minutes had gone by, and I was cleaning up my desk, and suddenly I start to hear the noise of the monitors. And I was like, what's going on? I'm like, I don't have anything on. Like, what is going on? And I turn around, and I guess we hadn't taken off what's called the pulse oximeter, the clip that goes on the finger that measures oxygenation. That started working again. And I look at her.
So just say that again. So the pulse oximeter was still on her finger.
Yes,
okay.
The pulse oximeter was still on her finger. So it was measuring her oxygenation. And that started.
But you all thought she was deceased.
Correct. Because there was no noise for the time before. And I looked at her, and she was awake and breathing.
Oh my God.
And we looked at each other, and we were like, what just happened? But it just really, like, obviously.
So her vitals were all on all the other, like on the monitors, they were gone. Like
so I had taken off the other other monitors. So that was the only one left on. And so that came back. So then I put the blood pressure cuff back on, and then I put the heart leads back on but she was awake. She was awake. And
but you had taken them off because you all thought that because there was no activity coming out of them because you thought she was deceased.
Yes.
So you're like, okay, we don't need these anymore. She started breathing.
Yes. And I apologize. There's another truck. It's usually quiet on a Saturday, but so really, the next morning she was up eating her breakfast like nothing happened. right? And so, that really obviously stayed with me. You hear stories about that, but to actually be witness to it was obviously impactful. And it just really has made me think over the years. And then coming into Joe Dispenza's work and now quantum biology, right? Understanding that there is so much out there that is in existence that our senses just don't pick up and that we're not aware of, or maybe we just haven't learned to pay attention to them. Like maybe we have the ability to access them, right? We just don't know how because we're not taught that.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, there is so much. And I'm surprised too, like it doesn't take much to open up those faculties, to open up those intuitive faculties. Like they're ready and waiting. They just
Yeah.
need a little bit of our attention and a little bit
And,
of our encouragement.
and I think I think the body needs to be cleaned up as well to be able to
Yeah.
access them. And there's so much, with the food supply, the water, the air, and all like the products that we purchase and put on our skin. And so we're so overloaded with toxins,
Yeah.
and which is again why quantum biology is so beautiful, and learning how to get the body to detoxify itself naturally, right? Using basic principles that we are graced with on this planet, right?
Yes.
We have all the materials in nature to be able to do that. So yeah,
It's
and
true.
so I just wanted to kind of get back. I know you kind of brought me back to my mom. Going back to my mom again, kind of things stem from my mom, but my mom has not been doing great. Like not from the cancer standpoint, but from that point, she had, her heart had started to deteriorate, and she is metabolically not healthy. She has sleep apnea and has used and is still using a CPAP machine, and sort of a few things that she often doesn't like to share with me because she knows that I kind of get on her case for changing her lifestyle.
You're going to have some suggestions.
But she was getting to the point where they were looking at working her up for heart surgery. And that just happened to be at a time. And I guess, I really look at the universe showing up in ways that are timely, bringing to my attention this technology called LifeWave, which I know you had David Schmidt on your podcast, and that was a phenomenal episode.
The little patches. Yes.
Yes. And so, especially with older people, my mom's in her 80s, it's hard to get them to make lifestyle changes, as much as you want them to. Sometimes they just need a little something to get them going and see some changes. And so when I started learning about these patches, it really fit right into everything I was learning about light and quantum biology and the impact that it has on the body. And so, I said to my mom, I said, we're going to do this. You don't have a choice. You're going to do this. She was okay with it. But I said, it's a patch. Nothing's going into your body. It's using your light to activate your own stem cells. And the person that I was enrolled under was a cardiac surgical nurse for 20 years. And she had told me she had never seen results in her whole career as a cardiac surgical nurse and in the electrophysiology unit that she has seen with these patches in heart patients. So that was, it was just a no-brainer for me. I'm like,
So
we're going to do this.
Okay. Yeah. I'm all in on quantum phototherapy, and it's easy.
It's easy and it's simple.
Easy. Your mom doesn't have to do anything. And
No.
just put the little thing on the back of her neck. Okay.
And I have to say, like, I didn't know what was going to happen, right? Like whatever, but I didn't think there was going to be any harm from it. Right. So let's just see. So within 2 weeks, I noticed her walking faster. So I walk with her all the time, and because she's in heart failure, she's very short of breath and she can't really even talk. I kind of am the one who does the talking when we're walking. We walk with my little dog that sniffs everything. So it's a good pace.
It's a leisurely pace.
Yeah. And she started walking faster and started walking on an incline, and she was talking while she's walking on an incline. And I was like, I had to stop her and say, do you realize that you're actually talking to me and you're not as short of breath and you're walking faster? And she stopped and she's like, I didn't actually really think about that. So that was pretty, I mean, within 2 weeks, that's pretty phenomenal. And then within 3 weeks, she was having a bunch of blood tests because of her heart. They're just monitoring a certain, a certain measurement for her heart medications. And they threw in her thyroid function test as well because she has a low thyroid. She's been on thyroid medication for over 30 years. And she came to me and said, I've got these results. I don't know how to read them, but something's off because they're out of range. And so I looked at them and I said, okay, I'm not going to be your doctor because that's what they teach you. Never be your doctor for family. And, I said, go to your doctor, but I'm pretty sure he's going to lower your thyroid medication. And sure enough, she went to her doctor the next day and he lowered her thyroid medication. So that was 3 weeks after starting these patches. So that's just my mom, right? And after that, I started sharing them with other people. So I'm like, let's just try them. Like, you're not getting anywhere with all these other things. You have so many people have chronic pain, right? Like so many people are dealing with such pain. And, if this can help, and it's not like taking a pill that blocks a chemical pathway, right? It works through light and the water network in the body.
It's the crystal in the patch is reflecting a certain frequency back using your own body's infrared light.
Right. Exactly.
Reflecting a frequency back in. So because I have people leaving comments under my interview with David Schmidt and they're like, how does he know which frequency does what? And I'm like, I don't know. Okay, I don't know.
well, but
all I know is my brain fog is gone. I don't know what to do. So maybe I don't know.
Well, no, I don't know the specific frequencies, but he spent 10 years in the lab getting to this point and doing the studies, right? Like he's done
mountains of clinical research.
It can help so many people at least transition from instead of using a pill that's going to cause all these other side effects and more problems, to using something that your body can actually heal from, because those pills don't heal anything. They just delay disease progression at best, right? And then you end up having to take more pills and more pills and more pills. And I just also feel very strongly in this day and age, and what I have come to understand my reality to be, that everyone needs to be as strong and fortified as possible. And if this can help that, and there's nothing going in the body, we're just using our own power that we were given by design, then I think that it's something that I'm embracing. So.
Wow. Yeah, I think so. It's really, I agree with you. Like the time to get strong and healthy is right now. Or yesterday would have been good too, but right now it's fine. I'm with you. We need it. And how, I'm just really appreciating like how open you are to all of the possibilities and all of the different ways to heal yourself and to pass that on to other people. And so in your work now, you've got like this phototherapy piece, you've got the holographic trauma healing piece. Are you working sort of like as a health coach? Obviously you have to be outside. Your licensing board would not be be supporting any of this woo-woo nonsense. So you've stepped completely away from the medical paradigm, and what does it look like now, how you approach people, like a combination of those things?
Well, yes, a combination. And I also, that ties nicely into the fact that I tell people specifically that, anything that they're doing is not a replacement for a healthy lifestyle, right? Like just speaking to these patches, right? Like it's not, and I love that David Schmidt says that as well, right? Like that he backs that up. And so really getting back to a healthy lifestyle and giving the body the proper signals that we were designed to use just will allow your body to heal and flourish the way it needs to be. So that it's really about educating the people that I come across. And so you really have to want to do it to work with me. Otherwise it's not going to work. Right. So there has to be a level of commitment to wanting to make the changes and taking responsibility. Like there was a recent interaction I had with someone that I kind of just made that comment about, it's about priorities and taking responsibility, and that person didn't really want to hear that, and so it's not gonna go very far.
Yeah, I'm always interested in there are people who are very triggered by that perspective, and they immediately feel blamed and shamed, and like, you're saying everything that's wrong is my fault. And I've had people reach out to me because that is a consistent message that comes out from from the faculty at the Institute of Applied Quantum Biology, from me, and people reach out to me saying, and they get upset, and I understand that perspective to a certain point, but at the end of the day, I've been there, right? Like, if I don't acknowledge this is my life, this is my subconscious,
Yeah.
and it's up to me to make different choices.
Yeah.
Right. And like, taking responsibility for mistakes only generates shame if we feel like we should never have made a mistake in the first place. And like, what human hasn't made a mistake? Of course we have. Of course we have.
Right.
And once I was able to accept, like, my own humanity, then it became, I'm like, oh yeah, I really screwed that up. That was not a great decision, right?
But isn't that like what we're here for anyways on Earth, right? Like, to have experiences.
I think so.
And
get to the in a lighthearted way, like you were saying earlier, talking about propaganda or whatever, and it's like, it's not about being like, oh my God, look at all the bad stuff. It's like, it's just being aware so we can make different choices,
right?
Or make a choice and not just be programmed all the time.
Yeah.
And like, a continuing mantra for me is, lighten up. It can pull, the vortex can pull you down, but I totally agree with you, Rachel. Like, what are we here for?
Yeah. And even there's just kind of on a last note, maybe this group of women that I am kind of connected with, there's 5 of us and we've got a group chat, and it is so apparent, right? The people that you spend time with are going to affect how you feel and how you impact other people as well, right? And there's a lot of dark stuff that happens in the world. There always has been. It's a matter of whether you pay attention to it or not, whether you know about it, but that's going to be there whether you look at it or not, right? Whether you are constantly immersed in it or not. And so instead of giving and feeding that frequency, if you are looking to create something better and create a world that you want, if you surround yourself with those people that are feeding that kind of energy, like, it can't help but kind of minimize that darkness, right? Like, and the darkness can't thrive when there's so much light there. And it just, like, these women, it's just been, honestly, it's been a godsend. Like, it lights up our day when we hear the messages. Like, we don't always get to them, but then, you're listening to them and it's like, man, like, this is really what life is about. Like, it really is.
It really is. It's this is a great place to end, because it's that sustenance that comes from being in, like, positive connection with other people.
And it's healing, right? It adds to the healing.
Yes. Other people who are, like, on the journey, they know you're on the journey. They see you, they see clearly. And yeah, I had a similar experience recently. I met up with some friends where we'd only been on, in group chats for years through all different things. And we saw each other in person. It was like magical.
Yeah.
You feel, yeah. And then you have that experience of a new type of reality. You're like, oh, life can feel like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who knew? How wonderful. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for everything you've done in your life, and then for coming and sharing it with all of us so that we can learn from you and you can model these changes and model what it's like to work your way through this wild and wonderful world.
Thank you. It was an honor. It was an honor to be here, honestly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, truly, I'm like such respect and acknowledgement to your strength and also sense of humor, right? Like it's very fun to talk to you, which is great.
Thank you. Thank you. You as well.
Hey. Thanks for being here. Woohoo! You made it to the end of another episode. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploratory adventure into new realms. Your energy and support are building a different world, and I am so grateful to be on this journey with you. Take care, and thanks.